Moody's Analytics, one of the most respected economic forecasting firms out there, they just put the chance of a recession in the next 12 months at 49%.
Wow. Yeah. That's high.
It is. And here's the truly terrifying part of that statistic. Their forecasting model has crossed that 50% threshold before literally every single recession since 2001.
Right. So we are sitting just millimeters away from that line right now.
Exactly. But I mean, for our scaling legends community, the contrast between what those macro indicators are flashing and what construction business owners are actually feeling right now, it's jarring.
Oh, totally. If you're listening to this, you are likely looking at a completely full project backlog. Your day-to-day is chaotic. You're probably turning away bids, right?
Yeah, you're just trying to get enough concrete poured by Friday.
Exactly. So it feels completely counterintuitive to sit here and talk about a survival playbook when you're just, buried in work.
Right. It's like framing a house under clear blue skies while the weather radio blares a severe storm warning. I mean, you're going to just ignore the radio because your immediate surroundings look fine?
You really shouldn't.
Probably not. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to look past that busy, chaotic pipeline. We need to analyze those flashing red economic indicators, understand what they actually mean, and most importantly, unpack a concrete 7-step recession survival playbook tailored specifically for the construction industry.
Yeah, but before we get to the defense part, we really have to understand the storm. Like, what exactly are we up against here?
Well, it isn't just Moody's sounding this alarm. You have Goldman Sachs put the recession probability at 25%. JP Morgan has it at 35%.
And Oxford Economics is predicting a 1 in 6 chance of a synchronized global recession, which is huge.
Yeah, and what's really crucial to understand about that Moody's 49% figure is that their model hit that number based on February data.
Right. That was entirely before the recent escalation in the Iran conflict.
Which, introduces this massive, unpredictable variable into the global economy. I mean, energy costs, diesel fuel, and petroleum-based materials basically run the entire construction industry.
They do. And Mark Zandi, he's the chief economist at Moody's, he has this historical rule of thumb that everyone needs to be paying attention to right now.
Oh, what is it?
He points out that every single recession since World War II, with the sole exception of the 2020 pandemic, was preceded by a significant oil price spike.
Wow, every single one.
Every single one. And currently, oil is hovering right near $100 a barrel. Oxford Economics notes that $140 a barrel is the actual trigger point.
So if it hits 140, what happens?
If crude hits that number, they project it would cause a 0.7% reduction in global GDP. And that specific drop would be enough to push the UK, the Eurozone, and Japan straight into economic contraction.
Okay, so we have this massive geopolitical energy risk hanging over our heads. But what about closer to home? The global economy is one thing, but what are the domestic warning signs that a U.S. contractor should actually be worried about?
Well, the domestic indicators are arguably way more concerning for the construction sector than the global ones. Let's look at the labor market.
Okay.
16 of the last 19 Bureau of Labor Statistics jobs reports have been revised downward after their initial release. That is the worst revision rate we have seen since 2008.
Wait, let me stop you there because that's a huge point. A downward revision means the government came out and said, hey, we added 300,000 jobs this month. And the stock market cheered.
Right, exactly.
But then a month later, they quietly adjusted the math and said, actually, it was only 150,000. It means the initial rosy picture was basically masking a severe underlying weakness in the economy.
That is the exact mechanism at play. And when you combine a weakening job market with the fact that residential building permits are noticeably declining and overall consumer sentiment is softening, you have the classic recipe for an economic slowdown.
Yeah, I mean, people who are worried about their jobs do not sign contracts for new custom homes.
No, and they definitely don't agree to massive commercial leases.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here on behalf of the listener, though. Contractors hear these doom and gloom recession warnings constantly, usually while they are still struggling to find enough skilled tradesmen just to man their current jobs.
Oh, I hear that all the time.
Right. So why should they take this specific macroeconomic warning seriously? Like, why isn't this just another false alarm from economists who, don't wear work boots?
According to Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report, there are 14 recession leading indicators actively tracking across the construction sector, and they are all pointing in the exact same direction.
All 14.
Yeah. We aren't just looking at general economic malaise, we are looking at industry-specific vulnerability.
Okay, don't let me off the hook with just a number. Give me an example of one of those indicators. What is flashing red in construction specifically that isn't showing up in the general economy?
Sure, a great example is the Architectural Billings Index. I mean, architects design the buildings that contractors are going to build, 9 to 12 months from now.
Right, they're the front of the line.
Exactly. So when architectural firms report a sustained drop in billings, which they are right now, that means the design pipeline is drying up. The current projects are finishing, but the future projects just aren't entering the funnel.
Well,
Yeah, when the broader economy catches a cold, construction tends to get pneumonia. The work requires so much upfront capital that it's always the first thing developers cut when credit tightens.
because the macro data is mirroring the warning signs of past crashes, we really need to look at exactly how the last major downturn tore through the construction industry. We need to understand our specific vulnerabilities today.
Yeah, we have to talk about the nightmare that was 2008.
Right. So tell us about 2008.
The sheer devastation of the 2008 crash on the construction sector just cannot be overstated. The industry lost 2.2 million jobs.
2.2 million, that's insane.
Think about that sheer volume of talent exiting the trades, man, many of whom never returned. The industry unemployment rate hit a staggering 27%.
27%. I mean, that is depression-level unemployment localized entirely within a single industry.
It was an absolute bloodbath. But what is vital to understand for anyone leading a business today is the domino effect of a construction recession.
What do you mean by domino effect?
The entire industry does not halt on the same day. In 2008, residential construction spending dropped 55% from its peak to its trough. That was the first domino to fall.
Right.
But commercial construction didn't drop immediately. It was insulated for a while.
Why is that? Oh, because if I'm a developer and I'm halfway through building a 50-story high-rise,
Yeah.
I can't just stop. The steel is ordered, the cranes are leased, and, the bank loan is already active.
Exactly. You were locked in. So the commercial sector followed 12 to 18 months later, experiencing severe 30 to 40% declines.
Okay, so if you were a commercial contractor in 2008, you might have felt totally fine while the residential guys were closing up shop.
Right.
You were looking at your backlog, thinking you were immune, not realizing your cliff was just 12 months away.
And that false sense of security destroyed thousands of companies. And we know exactly who was hit the hardest, too. Small contractors, specifically those under $5 million in annual revenue, failed at 3 times the rate of larger firms.
3 times. Why?
They simply didn't have the balance sheets to survive a 12-month gap in cash flow.
But there was a lifeline in all of that, right? It wasn't uniformly terrible across every single sector of the built environment.
No, it wasn't. Infrastructure spending actually increased during the fallout. The government stepped in with the ARA, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009.
Oh, right, the stimulus package.
Yeah, that government stimulus saved a ton of firms who were agile enough to pivot and bid on public works. And if we connect this to the bigger picture today, we have massive modern equivalents.
Like what?
Well, the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, passed in 2021, is still deploying billions in federal funds for roads, bridges, and broadband.
Wow, okay.
And internationally, Japan just announced a $73 billion energy investment. On the defense side, you have companies like AECOM sitting on a $151 billion defense contract. Government and infrastructure capital is still flowing heavily right now.
So it's literally like dominoes. Speculative residential construction falls first, then discretionary commercial topples a year later. But government work actually becomes the lifeboat you want to be sitting in.
Yes. You want to identify where those lifeboats are and climb into them way before your ship even begins to take on water.
Okay, so knowing that residential and commercial pipelines will eventually freeze while infrastructure flows, we can move from analyzing the macroeconomic problem to actively building a financial defense.
Let's do it.
We're shifting from theory to execution. So let's dive into the 7-step playbook for recession survival. Our first strategy is about confronting reality.
Yeah, the very first move is to stress test your backlog. You need to take your current, seemingly healthy pipeline and intentionally cut the projected revenue by 20%. Just erase it on paper.
Okay.
Then you have to ask yourself a really hard question. Can you still cover your fixed costs, your rent, your equipment leases, your core salary overhead for 6 months with that reduced revenue?
And if you can't?
If the answer is no, your budget cuts have to start right now. You cannot wait for the 20% to actually disappear.
I can just hear a business owner listening to this thinking, that sounds terrifying to actually execute. I mean, how do you objectively stress test a business without just panicking your whole leadership team and making everyone think the company is failing?
If you look at Smart Business Automator's market intelligence report, their cash flow modeling shows exactly how long a business survives under different revenue decline scenarios.
Oh, so it makes it just math.
Exactly. It takes the emotion completely out of the room. It's not about a leader walking in and panicking the staff. It's about pulling up a mathematical simulation on a screen so your leadership team can see the exact months where cash might get tight.
That makes total sense. And once you've identified those gaps through the stress test, you obviously have to plug them. Which brings us to our second strategy, building a cash fortress.
Yes, your ultimate target should be 3 to 6 months of operating expenses held in pure liquid reserve.
3 to 6 months. Okay.
The fundamental rule of thumb in any economic downturn is that every dollar of cash is worth exponentially more than every dollar of projected revenue. Revenue is just a promise on a piece of paper, cash is oxygen.
Right.
When credit markets tighten and banks stop lending to contractors, which they always do when a recession hits, that cash fortress is the only thing keeping your lights on.
But let's be empathetic to the reality of the trades here. A 6-month cash fortress sounds like an impossible mountain to climb for a contractor whose margins are razor thin, who, might be barely covering payroll this Friday.
Sure.
How do you transition from survival mode to building a fortress?
You build it systematically. You delay non-essential capital expenditures. You don't buy the new fleet of trucks. You maintain the old ones for another 2 years.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you start sweeping 1 or 2% of every progress payment into a separate, untouchable reserve account. You do it quietly, and you do it consistently.
Okay, and once you have that cash, you have to protect it from bleeding out through inflation, which requires a fundamental shift in how you bid. This is our third strategy, locking in pricing.
This is massive. Construction material prices have surged 45.3% since 2020.
Wait, 45%?
45.3, yeah. You just cannot afford to absorb any further inflation or unexpected material spikes during a downturn. Going forward, you absolutely must put escalation clauses on every single bid.
Okay.
Furthermore, you should aggressively refuse any fixed price contracts that extend longer than 90 days unless the materials are explicitly hedged or pre-purchased and sitting in a warehouse somewhere.
It's easy to say refuse fixed price contracts, but how does a smaller contractor actually sell an escalation clause to a developer without just losing the bid to a cheaper competitor?
Well, you have to frame it as shared risk for project certainty.
What do you mean?
You sit down with the developer and explain, look, if I sign a 12-month fixed price contract and copper spikes 20%, I go out of business and your project stalls indefinitely while you try to find a replacement contractor.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right. You tell them an escalation clause protects both of us by ensuring I stay solvent enough to actually finish your building. You are making them realize that forcing you to finance their material risk is dangerous for their own timeline.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. You aren't being difficult. You are protecting their completion date. Now, the fourth strategy dictates where you should actually be looking to deploy those bids. Diversify your sectors.
Yeah, you need to aggressively pivot your business development toward recession-resistant sectors. We already mentioned the IIJA infrastructure money.
Right, the government stuff.
But you should also be looking at defense contracts, healthcare facilities, energy infrastructure, and municipal water and wastewater management.
Because those don't stop.
Exactly. These are sectors where the spending is mandated by absolute necessity or government decree. It is completely disconnected from consumer confidence. You want to actively avoid speculative residential builds and discretionary commercial projects.
Discretionary commercial being things like boutique retail spaces, high-end office renovations, tenant improvements, things that corporations will immediately slash from their budgets the second their own quarterly earnings drop.
Exactly right. And our fifth strategy shifts from where you work to who you work for. You must strengthen your client relationships today.
That feels like basic business advice, though.
It sounds basic, but the survivors of any economic downturn are the ones whose clients call them first when budgets shrink. If a developer goes from building 5 projects a year down to just 1 project a year, you need to be the only contractor they trust to handle that sole project.
Right. You achieve that by over-delivering right now, when times are relatively good. It's about proactive communication, radical transparency on delays, and just making their life easier. Over-deliver today so you are the undisputed first call when times are bad.
Precisely.
Which leads us to the defensive side of the ledger, our sixth strategy. Cut discretionary spending immediately.
This is basic financial hygiene, but it's incredibly painful for people. You need to trim the fat while the business is still healthy.
So like what?
Axe ineffective marketing campaigns. Cancel the software subscriptions that only half your team uses, but most importantly, sell off your idle equipment before desperation sets in.
Oh wow, sell it now.
Do it right now, while the market for used equipment is still relatively strong. If you wait until a recession hits and everyone in your county is trying to offload their excavators to make payroll, you will get pennies on the dollar.
Man, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And our seventh and final financial strategy is about the money you're already owed. Accelerate your collections.
This is critical. You need to shift your standard billing terms from net 30 to net 15 wherever possible. Furthermore, you have to push for aggressive retainage release.
Okay, let's do a quick explanation for anyone newer to the industry. Retainage is when a client holds back, say, 5 to 10% of every invoice until the project is totally finished, just to ensure you don't walk off the job.
All right.
But in a business where your profit margin might only be 5%, that retainage represents your entire profit. You're doing all the work at break even until the very end.
Which is exactly why you have to negotiate early release. Too many contractors treat retainage as a bonus check they get at the very end of a job. In a recession, that retainage is your operating capital.
Cash in hand is absolutely everything.
Yes. Tell the client, once we hit the 50% completion milestone, we need the retainage reduced to 2.5%.
Essentially, you want to stop acting as a free 0% interest bank for your clients. So let me recap the playbook so far. Stress test the backlog, build the cash fortress, lock in pricing, diversify into recession-resistant sectors, strengthen client relationships, cut discretionary spending, and accelerate your collections.
That's the list.
We've secured the finances, the contracts, and the cash flow. But there is a massive trap waiting here. Because the most common fatal mistake companies make during a downturn isn't actually financial, it's how they handle their workforce.
Oh, this is so important. This brings us to protecting your biggest asset, the team. There is a strict golden rule when facing economic uncertainty. Do not start layoffs preemptively.
Yeah, firing preemptively to save cash is like throwing your best tools overboard to lighten the ship during a storm. When the weather finally clears, you might have survived, but you don't have the tools left to actually build anything.
That's why Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report includes workforce analytics that show exactly which roles are revenue generating versus overhead. You have to understand the hidden costs of losing your people.
Which are what? Exactly.
Well, you have likely already spent between $8,000 and $25,000 just recruiting, onboarding, and training each person on your payroll. When you lay them off out of fear, you are instantly vaporizing that investment.
So if a contractor's revenue genuinely drops, and we agree they shouldn't lay people off preemptively, what is the actual alternative strategy? How do they keep paying these people?
Cross-training. Before you even consider touching your headcount, you need to look at moving people between divisions.
Okay.
Let's say your residential side slows down significantly. Instead of firing those project managers or estimators, you spend the time training them to bid on the public works division we talked about earlier.
Oh, that's smart.
Secondly, you eliminate all overtime across the entire company. You share the remaining regular hours among the team to keep everyone employed and off the unemployment line.
Right. It's about preserving the core engine of the company. You're prioritizing the survival of the collective over the extra earnings of a few.
Above all else, you must protect your A players at all costs. The people who drive your culture, who solve the impossible problems in the field, and who take extreme ownership of their outcomes.
Yeah, because they're the ones who will pull you through.
They will be entirely impossible to replace when the economic recovery eventually starts. If you let them go, your competitors will scoop them up, and they will use your former top talent to outbid you for years to come.
But let's live in reality for a second. Sometimes, despite all the cross-training, despite the cash fortresses and the shifted billing terms, the revenue just isn't there. The well runs dry and cuts become unavoidable.
Yeah, it happens. If layoffs become an absolute mathematical necessity to save the company, the rule of leadership is to do them fast, be entirely honest with the team about why it's happening, and be as generous as you possibly can with severance.
Fast, honest, and generous.
The absolute worst thing a leader can do is execute 3 or 4 agonizing rounds of small cuts over a 6-month period. It completely destroys company morale.
Oh, I can imagine. Death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. Everyone spends their day paralyzed by survivor's guilt, wondering if they are next on the chopping block instead of focusing on their work. You execute one deep round of cuts, ensure the immediate survival of the business, and then you look the remaining team in the eye and tell them that their jobs are secure.
That is incredibly stark, but it is deeply necessary advice. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to remind everyone listening that the tone of our conversation today is really about empowerment and preparation. It is not about doom and gloom panic.
Right. Knowledge is only valuable when it is applied. Having this playbook means you don't have to operate out of fear. You can operate out of strategy. You can see the storm coming and calmly board up the windows.
So here is our actionable advice for you, the listener. We want to challenge you directly. Run the stress test this weekend. Take 1 hour. Sit down, pull up your backlog, cut your projected revenue by 20% on paper, and honestly assess where your business stands. Do not wait for the storm to hit to figure out if your roof leaks.
Taking an hour this weekend to run those numbers, to have that uncomfortable conversation with yourself, could literally be the difference between your business surviving the next 2 years or becoming a statistic.
Absolutely. If you found this playbook valuable, please subscribe to the show, rate it, and leave a review. Most importantly, share this deep dive with other contractors in your network who need to hear this. A stronger, more resilient industry benefits all of us. And to learn more about the tools and data we discussed today, visit smartbusinessautomator.com.
Preparation is the ultimate competitive advantage, guys. The companies that take action right now are going to be in a drastically different position than those who bury their heads in the sand and just wait to see what happens.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder. We've spent this entire conversation talking about defense, how to survive the storm, how to protect your cash, how to keep your team. But consider this. History shows the most dominant construction empires of the next decade won't be built by the companies that merely survived. They will be built by the companies who use this coming recession to go on the offensive. The ones who buy up weakened competitors, who scoop up prime talent that other companies foolishly let go, and who acquire cheap, liquidated equipment at the absolute bottom of the market. Are you preparing to just weather the storm? Or are you preparing to buy the neighborhood when it passes?